Well, good morning. It's time to get started. I'd like to thank you all for coming out today. Again, the purpose of this little gathering is to really talk about an activity that happened, or an award that was made to the city just several weeks ago. The city received a $10 million Tiger grant. Now, that in itself is exciting, but what we want to do is explain what that means to the citizens of Kalispell, what that means to the future of this city. And I think if you've heard the mayor, anytime he's been talking, he refers to this particular point in time as transformative. This is a project that will actually change the way we look at Kalispell and the way we see the future of Kalispell going. So it's an exciting time, and we want to explain that to you and what that really means to the city. But before we get going too far down that road, I would like to bring you back to how it all began ever so briefly. How many of you remember where you were 5 years ago? I mean, I know exactly where I was 5 years ago. Yes, right down the hall here. I know exactly where I was 5 years ago because I was sitting at my desk, and Katharine Thompson here came in and said, "Tom, I've got an idea. I have some money for planning." And my ears perked up. Katharine had been working on a brownfields program. Brownfields is a program, it's funded by EPA, where her job was to go out and find properties that had some environmental issues. These issues might limit redevelopment of the property, might limit resale of the property at the time. Issues like asbestos or like a buried fuel tank underground, so that when you go to sell that property, oh my gosh, what are we going to do about that? So Katharine was out there preemptively working on those properties. Well, EPA put out a notice that there was some planning monies to take care of a neighborhood at a larger scale. So Katharine came in and said, "Tom, what about this?" And I said, "Do I have a plan for you?" And we embarked on a planning process 5 years ago, and this is a picture of the actual plan itself. Now, a lot of plans you work, and in the life of a planner, you end up putting on a shelf and life moves on. This plan actually has a life behind it. We identified an area 2 blocks north and 2 blocks south of the railroad tracks, and an area that stretched from Woodland Park on the east all the way over to Meridian Road on the west. And in that area, we call that the core area. And we said, there's an area here that really needs redevelopment. There's a lot of things going on in that area. There's a lot of things that aren't going on in that area. And I'm not sure how many of you have actually walked through that area, but you'll notice that if you do, there's a lot of vacant, blighted properties in there. And it was a little bit of fear and trepidation that we started off in this planning process, because attempts have been made in that area in the 10 years prior to that, 2 major attempts to plan or develop a plan for redevelopment. One was led by a former community development director, and another one was led by a former city manager. Both of them got nowhere. And at the time, actually, that Katharine and I started this planning process, there was really little political support to go out and do anything in that neighborhood. In fact, we had a council at the time that was concerned about calling property blighted. They didn't want people living in a neighborhood that had the B word over the top of them, blighted. That might affect their properties, their property values, or just how they saw life. So there was limited support. We knew that there were problems and issues in the neighborhood. We knew that for the last 30 years, the city's been talking about pulling the railroad tracks out of Kalispell. That's one of those dreams. And 30 years ago, there were still 30 users on that railroad. Well, when we started 5 years ago, it was down to less than a handful, maybe two users on the railroad tracks. So we said, well, let's go out there and find out what's going on. But when you do a plan, it's easy for us to say, what are your problems? Instead, we went out and talked to the neighborhood. There were about 450 property owners. So Katharine and I went out and talked to about 2/3 of the property. 2/3 of the property ownership out there, one-on-one, sitting down at their front desks, at the coffee tables, at wherever, and said, what are your problems? What are your concerns? What are your hopes? What are your expectations? What's holding you back as you live and work in this neighborhood? And we were somewhat surprised because they told us what their issues were. We were not surprised by that, but we were surprised what they told us. They told us the number one issue, get the railroad tracks out of here. You know, they might have brought life to the city at one point, but they are strangling us. They're limiting what we can do. We want the tracks out. Not only do we want the tracks out, but we want a trail back in. We want to bring green space back into our neighborhood. We want to have an opportunity to grow and flourish. We want to have an opportunity to bring in new development. We want to have an opportunity to be like other communities that we have seen as we've traveled around that are vibrant and active, because there is no vibrancy and there's no action in this neighborhood right now. So that's what they told us. As we went through the process, we met with the neighborhoods. We held meetings at the fairgrounds, at Art in the Park, neighborhood community meetings. We had a newsletter that went out every season, 4 times a year, letting people know what was going on. And as we went through the process, we brought on an architectural firm, a design team, to help us put these ideas into a vision that you could actually see and look at and get excited about. And this whole project really caught fire. It really took off. It took off to the point where in 2013 we held a presentation, a chamber presentation at the Red Lion Inn. Over 200 people paid $18 a head. They got dinner, but they came to actually see this plan, and there was tremendous community support to the point where when this plan was finally presented to the city council, it was a unanimous vote. And I'm not sure how many of you have watched councils over the years, but any project that comes up with unanimous support, it's just unheard of. And this project continues to have tremendous council support right up until today. So that brings us up to the plan itself. What I want to do is just sort of, that was an overview of how we got the plan. But again, the plan is just a bare bones book that sits here. Let's talk about how we got to where we are, and then I'm going to let Katharine talk, and she'll take over the mic and talk to you about the Tiger Grant itself, and we're going to go on. But just a little bit of background again. Our roots. Why would a community, and when we were putting this plan together, people asked, why would you pull the railroad out of Kalispell? There are roots, and here's a picture on the screen. The railroad came in 1892, and this is a banner of when the railroad actually came to town. And you see on the left, there was excitement, but on the right, I love this quote. Beer and whiskey were as free as the fresh air, and that evening, there were many men that were partly sober. That was a Kalispell resident who said that, but it was excitement. This was a major change. When the railroad came to your town, you were on the map. Well, it was just a few years later, in 1904, that a dastardly deed happened in Kalispell. Whitefish stole our railroad. So the main line that had gone through Kalispell was diverted up through Whitefish. We became relegated to a branch line, a backwater line, a spur coming off of Columbia Falls. And that was actually the beginning of the end of railroad activity in Kalispell. So that's one of the reasons why we are looking today at saying, what do we do with a railroad in town that doesn't really serve the needs of Kalispell? What do we do with a neighborhood that really wants that railroad track removed? What do we do with the costs of taking care of some of the existing businesses that are on the rail right now who need that rail? And frankly, the city of Kalispell needs rail, but do we need it in the downtown area? So those were the questions that the plan raised. And as I introduced Katharine here, she and our team started looking for ways to start financing this plan. How do we make this plan a reality? Because these are some expensive things we're talking about. So as we unfold this story, Katharine, come tell us what happened just several weeks ago.
Hey, we're excited because we got a Tiger Grant. We need to talk still about a little more history that got us to Tiger. We are very fortunate to have this great partnership with Flathead County Economic Development Authority, and without that, we wouldn't be where we are today. And it was a really unique marriage, if you will, of complementary interests that came together in the right place at the right time that made it possible for this community to be successful. So when you realize that concurrently with the city working on a plan, the core area plan, at the same time, and actually long before that, for some 20 years, Flathead County Economic Development Authority, or FCEDA, had been working to develop an industrial rail park. And of course, by industrial rail park, we mean basically a business park that is served by railroad. So that allows businesses, manufacturing businesses and the like, that need access to the railroad to co-locate and in an efficient manner access the rail. So they had been working very diligently for some 20 years, and they had tried in other neighboring communities. Unfortunately, those efforts had fizzled, had failed for a variety of reasons. It turns out while we're in a very large county, there are really very few places appropriate to locate an industrial rail park. So as FACETA had grant dollars with which to acquire property to build a rail park, the clock was ticking on those dollars, and at the same time, a lot happens at Tom's office. I go down to Tom's office and said, hey, we, the city, had been working through our brownfields program on assessments of the former McElroy and Wilkin gravel pit site. So we were doing environmental site assessments, phase 1 and phase 2 there. And so Tom was the one who said, well, you could probably build a rail park there because it's right along the existing BN spur, and it is immediately to the south of some 50 acres or more, actually, that BN already owns, just outside the city limits. This is a story of the partnership between the city and the county working together. It's also a story internally at the city about planning department working with economic development, because in economic development, of course, we're very concerned about job creation, and we're concerned about building quality of life. And in planning, Tom's really working hard at making this community make sense into the future for the next 100 years. So when all of these things can come together, it is really the moon and the stars aligning. And it just kept happening over and over for us. So that partnership happened where Flathead County Economic Development Authority did indeed look at the former McElroy and Wilkin gravel pit site. They acquired that property with some EDA grant funds that they had already garnered. And then at that point, they're ready to develop a rail park, but turns out it's really expensive to do that. So how do we come up with the funding to make that happen? And that's where we, along this process somewhere, learned about the U.S. Department of Transportation's Tiger Grants, which is Transportation Investment Generating Economic Recovery. I can't believe I stumbled on it. I've only said it 100 times. But anyway, so that grant program is a federal program. It's highly oversubscribed. They typically see many hundreds of applications. And in fact, the city and FACETA submitted as a team. We submitted a grant application 3 times. The third time was the charm, and in 2015 we were funded. So when I said it's highly oversubscribed, there's actually $500 million allocated to Tiger 2015. There were over 627 applications submitted for that money, and only 39 projects were funded. And we are very fortunate to be one of those. In fact, Montana has been funded 6 out of the 7 rounds of grant funding. They're very, very competitive. The use of the grant funds is strictly for infrastructure. So in our project, what that means is the ability to put in the water and sewer lines, the road, and the railroad track that is needed to build the rail park. And now I have to, because this is a project with many moving parts and it's a little complicated, I need to back up again and say, to Tom's planning point, where the tracks were laid 100 years ago wasn't working for Kalispell anymore, in that not only was it creating safety hazards for people who live here, it also was restricting Kalispell's ability to bring in new rail serve business. We can no longer operate under a model that worked 100 years ago, where you could bring in an industrial manufacturing business right to downtown. So we needed a new rail park to do that. This point, Kalispell, of course, as you know, has changed a lot over those 100 years. I'd like to let Tom talk about that again and talk about the implications of having the rail in the middle of Kalispell. But the project itself, the Tiger project, is really 2 parts. So it's first to build an industrial rail park at the former McElroy and Wilkin gravel pit site, and then secondarily pull up the existing track and replace it with a trail. So those are really 2 distinct components, but taken together, they're transformative for our entire community.
So this is kind of a mouthful of a project to really describe, because as you started in it, we started doing a plan. The plan said we needed to pull the railroad tracks out. If you pull the railroad tracks out, what do you do with the train? So we needed to have a place for the train to turn around, and it just kind of goes on and on. Well, if the train's going to turn around, we need a place for that to happen. If that's going to happen, and we need a rail industrial park, that can work together, and it just keeps going on and on and on. It's like one of those, as soon as you've got one issue figured out, another one pops up and another one pops up. So let's go back to why we felt it was important to get the tracks out of Kalispell. And if you see on the map, you'll see the tracks coming right through the middle of Kalispell, and you'll see something that's really obvious up there, and you look at that picture, there's a total absence of anything that might be green. It's just a stark industrial, quasi-commercial area, and the tracks go right through it, separating north from south. When you do that, let's do that. When you do that, oh man, this goes fast. When you do that, you see these red dots? Those are typical road crossings that you would expect to have, or those are the road crossings you expect to have in a city. Every red dot shows a potential road crossing. Some of those have been closed. So in Kalispell, we have 6 road crossings across that track. Normally you'd have 16 roads coming across the tracks based on the way Kalispell is built. But you'll see the dots there. They're blocked. This is also, there's only 2 existing businesses left on the tracks. So why are we holding the city hostage to a track system that provides the needs for 2 businesses? And as Katharine said, there's really no future for additional business activity along the tracks. Rail service does not locate on 50-foot wide lots. It just doesn't happen. There just isn't enough room. And that's all we have up and down the tracks. You see several road crossings where the mall is, they've actually been closed. We cannot get another rail crossing or another pedestrian crossing in Kalispell without closing another one. Burlington Northern said, you have what you have. If you want another crossing, you're going to have to eliminate a crossing somewhere else on the line. Incredibly stifling for what we're trying to accomplish here in the city in the future. So, did you want to... Actually, what we have here, yeah, how we coordinate this. What you have here is just the overall project area. And as I said, the project area started in that area in green. That's the original area we started looking at. We started looking at the rail. What do we do with the rail? But you quickly realize that when you solve the rail problem, there's a bigger solution than just pulling the tracks out of Kalispell. Where do you put the rail? And how do you take care of the rail users? So the area in purple or lavender to the top of the screen that you see there, that shows the next important component, and that's Katharine's going to take a few minutes and talk about that coordination and what that involved in terms of developing a rail park and how all these steps have to come together for a single project to happen. So go ahead.
All right, so we'll look a little more closely at that rail park location. The red track mark there, and let me see if I can use a...
No,
oh,
doesn't work on this.
Sorry, can't do that. All right, so there's, to the far right of your screen, there's the red shows track that exists today, and the highest line of track on the screen there at the uppermost corner shows existing track as well. That track is currently in place along the property that BN owns, and then what sort of shows up in the middle across the purple is the proposed new track, and that's the track, albeit it'll be more track than what we show there. That's what will be built in the Tiger Grant project. So to Tom's point, one important piece was that as soon as a train leaves Columbia Falls, it basically has to turn around on the west side of Kalispell today. And so, frankly, even if Kalispell had no rail users, until we solve for that problem, until we solve for a new way to turn the train around, we were still going to have the tracks in town. So again, it made sense to look at some alternatives, and under this plan, there will be a turnaround point just north of the existing overpass bridge, or underpass bridge. As I said, FACETA is the arm of the county that works on economic development, and they are leading the charge on the development of the rail park and the construction there. We'll talk more in detail a little bit later about the schedule. This is an image that shows you what the rail park, when it was a gravel pit, and it was a reclaimed gravel pit, sort of what it looked like. There will be a good deal of work ahead, and that schedule will be talked about more. But what is intended now is for 4 locations there at the rail park to be developed, and one of those will be taken by CHS. So CHS is one of our existing rail users, and we'll talk more again later about their existing locations and that transfer and their move. But I also want to be sure that we don't miss an opportunity to talk about the value of this rail park. Yes, for businesses that locate there. Yes, for the potential businesses that are here locally now to locate there, and for the ability to attract new businesses to locate there. But I think it's also really important to recognize that that rail park will create a new opportunity for businesses that want to access the rail but not be located there. And that's an important distinction. So this may really open up great business opportunities for a large number of businesses in Kalispell and the outside, the surrounding area, where they need access to rail, but they don't need it every day, or they don't need to be located in the rail park because their level of usage is not at a threshold that demands that location. So I think it's very important that we all recognize that one of the strongest parts of this project, and I think what helped it to be funded, was to see that this is about helping the local community, the local businesses that exist today, but also helping this community build and diversify its economy by attracting new businesses and recognizing that having the connection to the outside, beyond this valley and beyond Montana, rail is a really important function of that. So while we're really just trying to move that rail location, rail access, from one place to another, we're not trying to lose that rail because we recognize the value of that. Want to talk a little about downtown?
Yes, let's go about the trail. So again, 2 major components of this project. One is the rail park. The other one is the trail, near and dear to my heart. And what you have on the screen right now is a representation of what it could be. So when we talk about a trail through town, excuse me, people ask, why would you build a trail through town? I mean, what's it supposed to do? And I want you to just visualize for a second. Back in 1992, which is almost 25 years ago, there was not a mile of trail in the Flathead Valley. And that's about the time people started talking about trails. And as that started to snowball and gain energy and excitement, we actually started seeing trail development happening. So that if you're at the west end of the trail system that you're showing on the map here, which is over by Meridian, you're actually connecting into a trail system that goes 10 miles out to Kyla, 10 miles down to Summers, 4.5 miles north up to Reserva 93, up to Consumption Junction up there. And you're starting to see a network to come together. So as you take people using that trail system and run a trail through the middle of downtown Kalispell, you're suddenly connecting that system with the people living in downtown Kalispell all the way over to Woodland Park. And Woodland Park and beyond, this trail actually will go across the railroad bridge, the underpass bridge by Rig Ford, and that's where this particular trail will stop. So I'm going to talk about the trail itself in a moment, but I want to continue that vision of where these trails could go. We have started discussions with Evergreen and Columbia Falls about developing a trail connecting Evergreen and Kalispell up to Columbia Falls. Columbia Falls is already working, funding, and in the process of building a trail system from Columbia Falls up to Glacier Park. So start thinking about what a trail system like that could look and what that could mean for people in this community, not just for tourists coming here, but for those of us who live in this town, you know, the ability that we have to get around and just use those types of amenities. So the trail we're talking about, if we could start at the east side, where the railroad will stop is going to be just east or just north of the bridge. Railroad's going to terminate there. Our pedestrian path will start there. It'll actually start down on Flathead Drive, which is the road right next to, there's an intersection by the Conrad Complex. Flathead Drive is right there. That's where the trail will actually start. It will rise up across the railroad bridge. The railroad bridge becomes a pedestrian path, and we have photos later, pictures later. We'll show you what that could look like. But it goes down past Woodland and through the heart of Kalispell. We're talking a 10 to 12 foot paved. Could be concrete, could be asphalt paved path system. We're talking about benches, grass, pedestrian lighting for night use. We're talking about other amenities. It's going to be a linear park and a trail system through Kalispell. It's budgeted so that we have crossings at the various streets we have, whether it's 3rd and 4th or 1st East or Main Street. How do we get across those roads? We're going to work on designs that can actually take people across safely. Ped crossing lights, whatever, but safety is going to be paramount. But that's factored into this program, and it's just an opportunity to open up an area. So visualize as you continue over by the Chamber building. Does anyone have a spare train engine they'd like to donate? Or a caboose? And actually, I have someone who, if we could find a rail dining car, said they would actually start a restaurant. And I'm going to hold them to that promise. But as you go past the Center Mall, it will be going on the north side of the Center Mall. What if the Center Mall opened up a northward-looking face and it emptied out onto the trail, and you saw expansion from the Center Mall going northward? We're going to show you pictures of what that might look like later. And as we go on over to connecting to the Meridian Trail, what if we had 1 or 2 trailheads where we actually had parking facilities along that trail? We actually had bathroom facilities where people could come, park, and use this system and actually get on it right now. Because a trail going from somewhere to somewhere, people have to be able to access it and use it. So all those things are factored into what could happen, what will happen with this trail system. And in a few minutes, we'll give you the timing on this. But this is a trail coming to your neighborhood soon. So... And again, this is just the grand picture of the whole area. Again, we're just bringing it back to the project. Slide. Oh, that's me again. So, another component of this, as we talked about, the trail system going in, but there's also a concept called complete streets, building streets that connect neighborhoods. A complete street is a street that has not only a driving surface, asphalt and curb and gutter, but it has sidewalks and boulevards and street trees and amenities for a bike path, and it has sewer and water and other utilities in it. It is a street that's designed to handle everybody's needs. We had talked before about the railroad track was really stifling what we have in downtown Kalispell. You really can't get through the city. You're really relegated to using Main Street, First Avenue East. And I'm going to ask, how many of you remember when First Avenue East did not cross the tracks? I've got 2, 3, like just a handful of you out there. There was a time, and it was maybe 20 or 25 years ago, where First Avenue East did not cross, where you stopped right there. And now it's just as normal as day. It's like, wow. And it dramatically changes how we do traffic. What we would like to do is to interject at least 4 more crossings along the railroad tracks. We have some hypothetical crossings shown on your monitors that you can see. But what would life be like if you could actually cross the tracks? We take it for granted on the west side that once you leave 5th west by the Senex, that you'll never have to be able to cross again all the way over to Meridian. It's a long way to go around to get to somebody just on the other side. What if we had 2 or 3 crossings through there where people could access property to the immediate north? What if over on the east side a 5th or a 6th went through, or a pedestrian access went through over by Woodland connecting up with Whitefish Stage? Those are all activities that will be part of this grant application. What you see right now are this particular map shows typical accesses that are blocked. They're barriers right now. They can't be. And this is a zoom in on what could be. These are theoretical alignments. So you'll see a 6th, the 7th, and an 8th Avenues west. You'll see maybe a 5th Avenue east. These aren't guaranteed to be in those specific locations, but we need to create more access across that rail, especially as the rail's removed. So we'll have an opportunity to do that. Video time. I'm going to turn the mic over to Katharine because she can actually talk about what we're going to be looking at here.
All right. Well, as that video gets loaded up for you, I just want to let you know that we did include, as part of our application, a brief video that does a flyover of the entire project as it's intended. And so we thought that it might be helpful to share that with you as well. It is available on the city's website under Community and Economic Development. It is actually stored on YouTube. So that is a simple overview of the project. And I think...
So this is a big project. This video moves fast.
It does.
Katharine narrates it, but if you look, her lips won't be moving. She's actually very good at this. but it really tries to pull together the entire project, because as we're explaining it to you, you're getting bits and pieces, and you're wondering, how does all this come together? And that's been our dilemma as we went for funding agencies, as we talked to the public. There are so many moving pieces. How do we show an overview? And this is a really good overview.
All right, I think that we're ready to pull that up.
Modern technology. There we go. Oh, no yet.
We're getting closer.
That's not it?
No. Well, you're at the presentation, but I'll step away.
Step away.
Sorry.
And this was included in the Tiger Grant application, so when it went down to DC for them to review, they could actually see this, and it brought it together.
Was up.
So, and as we talk here, this is not meant to be a monologue, even though we're being filmed, and it limits our style here. But if you have questions, feel free to toss questions out at any time. So as we have a brief technical pause here, any questions on what we've gone on so far?
The Glacier Rail Park Kalispell Core Area Development and Trail
Yes.
will prepare northwest Montana for the
No, it's going to be a parallel set of tracks.
heart of Kalispell into a thriving city center while creating a modern rail-served facility to attract new business, and park will be constructed in a
There'll be two sets of track. And the question was, how does the railroad turnaround going to function? There'll be two sets of track, and it's called a runaround. So the engine will pull in, actually run around, back up, and reconnect and take off again. So it's a very efficient way of doing it. But as Katharine said right now, once a train leaves Columbia Falls, it has to go all the way through Kalispell. There's no stopping and turning around. It goes all the way through Kalispell, even if it's picking up one single car in Evergreen. All the way through Kalispell, does its turnaround, and comes all the way back through Kalispell. So the whole focus there is, how do we get that out of Kalispell? We had an interesting fact. The school buses, one of the interesting facts, school buses, was it 50,000? Over 50,000 stops a year our school bus and our busing system makes just across those tracks. Can you imagine what that is like to be a bus driver? Now, one guy doesn't do it, but 50,000 times per year. So, yes, we do feel it when we're right behind the buses, and I'm sure the people on board the bus do. So we are ready with the overview video, so we'll turn it over.
Glacier Rail Park Kalispell Core Area Development and Trail will prepare northwest Montana for the 21st century by transforming the underutilized heart of Kalispell into a thriving city center while creating a modern rail-served facility to attract new business and expand existing businesses. Tiger 2015 funds will leverage local, state, federal, and private dollars to assist with the development of rail, road, and safety infrastructure in Glacier Rail Park. The rail park will be constructed in a reclaimed gravel pit, creating approximately 200 jobs and increasing freight movement via rail along the Great Northern Corridor. The project shifts rail use out of Kalispell's core area to a location that matches rail with highway access and is zoned for sustained industrial growth. The two existing rail users will be relocated to the park, allowing for abandonment and removal of these tracks for redevelopment. This core area includes 44 acres of dispersed, vacant, blighted, and brownfield property. A Tiger 2015 grant will provide funds for the construction of nearly 2 miles of paved multi-use trail and 4 complete street connections. This serves to connect the community, particularly the economically disadvantaged and elderly, to business districts, schools, shopping, healthcare facilities, workforce training, and employment assistance. Kalispell was built by the railroad over 120 years ago. The town grew to serve dozens of businesses along the tracks. Since then, Kalispell's growth to a city of 20,000 has leapfrogged over the rail track and choked the line, just as, conversely, the tracks themselves are choking the center of town. City streets were developed with no sidewalks. Railroad tracks are encumbering, dividing, and sometimes wholly isolating properties, preventing the redevelopment of prime infill locations. The tracks restrict north-south traffic to only 6 intersections across the 2-mile width of the city, shunting traffic to US 93, our Main Street, causing traffic congestion and delays at the height of summer when 2 million tourists travel through Kalispell on their way to visit Glacier National Park. The Glacier Rail Park Kalispell Core Area Development and Trail is a transformative project for Northwest Montana, creating regional economic opportunities and sparking community revitalization. It will breathe new and sustainable life into this beautiful community for the next 120 years.
So what we'd like to do now is take you on a little tour, show you some of the architectural graphics, some of the vision that we had for the project and for the trail. What you have seen on the screen in front of you is we talked about the railroad bridge. What if that became, instead of a railroad bridge, the pedestrian crossing and a welcome to Kalispell sign on it? And you can see the picture above shows an individual walking across that bridge, not recommended. But what if we turn it into an asset instead of what it is right now coming into our east entrance to Kalispell? This is another picture of the picture above. You're looking down to the left onto Woodland Park and the water facility features there. And to the immediate right up there, you're up against Rig Ford, which is a vacant site right now. What if that was transformed into a trail system that allowed easy access down to Woodland Park? And what if that property to the north was redeveloped into high-density residential or an office complex or a hotel or restaurants or something of that nature where people could have a great viewing and easy access down to the trail, down to Woodland Park, and turning that into a huge an asset. And as you can see right now, that thoroughfare through there, as we talked to Roger Nassett, our police chief, he said, many of us clientele actually walk through that area. And what it would be great if we could turn it into another, a different type of amenity for the city. This is a picture that's taken just to visualize you're 500 feet above the Chamber Building, looking west. You'll see the trail crossing Highway 93, our main street, and you'll see that trail winding to the north of the Center Mall. And if you look up to the area to the right that shows the existing conditions, it's hard to imagine unless you walk back there how barren and lunar the landscape is to the north. That land is owned by the Center Mall. The Center Mall would love to have an opportunity to develop that area to the north. I have a picture of that coming up here shortly. But it opens up areas that are otherwise landlocked. Let's try that again. The clicker is faster than I am. This is a picture standing on Main Street. If you see Colonel Sanders' bucket, it is right up the street there. You see a very narrow sidewalk. You see a very wide street system. That's the existing conditions. What if that was redeveloped, narrowing Main Street down? What if it was crosswalks were extended further out, bulb outs, further out into the street so people could walk safely across the roads? What if we had two-story higher density development right up against the street, offering people retail opportunities? Just another vision. If you look at the far end of this picture, we have the courthouse at the south end of Main Street. But as you come back this way, that frames our Main Street on the south. How do we frame our Main Street on the north? Here's another picture. I've got to be... Yeah, there we are. We missed one on the... This is a close-up of the Center Mall. And if you rarely walk on the north side of the Center Mall. It is a large, long, white face of a building. And as you can see on the upper left, the existing conditions, it's a rail. It's kind of sketchy back there. But what if we redevelop that with the trail system going through there, allowing new buildings to build across? What if the Center Mall opened up door fronts and retail storefronts out onto that trail system? And across the way we had an open plaza, some architectural features, maybe restaurants, maybe outside seating, maybe a place for a farmer's market. Think of the things that could happen out there, providing new life and vitality to that part of the community. And as we talk about these things, these are not far-fetched dreams. Woodbury & Associates is the current owner of the mall. They bought the mall in the last several years premised on this plan being implemented. They caught the vision of what this plan could be for their property. They caught the vision of what that could mean for their investment and their ability to further invest. And they're looking at very closely at doing some pretty exciting things in this area and in the very near future. So timing, did you want to handle timing, Katharine?
All right, so we've talked about a lot of exciting things, and we're all wondering, well, when is it going to happen? Because it can't happen soon enough. Well, it's going to happen pretty quick, though. Under the Tiger Grant, we have an obligation to complete all of this work within 5 years. So I will tell you that to preface all of this, but we have a really aggressive schedule in place, and we anticipate being able to make these deadlines instead, which are a little earlier. So we're looking at 2016. That means just a few weeks away, beginning construction at the rail park. So you will be seeing dirt move this spring of 2016 out there. Then CHS will be locating to the rail park in 2017. Now I want to be a little careful about that because that component where CHS does its own construction is really separate from, it is not part of the Tiger Grant project. That's another investment that CHS is making in a new facility, and we'll talk a little bit about that, how that sort of shakes out in the overall plan. And again, I'm back to having to say there's so many moving pieces that forgive me if it seems I'm skipping around, but there's just a lot of parts to this. So CHS will begin their construction in 2017. Actually, the pad will be probably in place by the end of the building season in 2016. So they'll really be looking at getting that grain elevator up in 2017. And then in 2018, we'll be looking at pulling up the existing track. The rail banking agreements need to be completed, and then building the actual trail and complete streets in 2018. So again, that's a really aggressive schedule. We're talking about an investment here of almost $22 million. If you add in the investment that Cenex is making in their new location, that's another 12. So, we're popping up to a really good number, well over into the 30 million mark, and we anticipate that even in the coming 5 years that it's reasonable to see that we'll have over $50 million invested in this area in Kalispell as a direct result of this Tiger Grant. So really leveraging that investment from the U.S. Department of Transportation. Do you want to? Should we talk a little about?
Yes, let's talk about that.
So CHS, as I said, they're involved in this, of course, because they're the major user in Kalispell of the rail, and so it was critical to help them address their needs in a different way. Their business model is really well served by a relocation to the new rail park, and so they, over the years, of course, CHS in one iteration or another has been in Kalispell for over 100 years. They actually have 3 locations in Kalispell right now, and as part of their relocation, they will be selling those properties over to Flathead County Economic Development Authority. Flathead County Economic Development Authority will in turn look for opportunities for developers and other investors to redevelop those properties right in this core area. And as you heard on the video and we've alluded to earlier, there are actually some 44 acres, really more than that, of properties that are vacant, blighted, underutilized in any kind of way. And so this is a tremendous opportunity for Kalispell to see reinvestment into infill projects. And some of us may not always realize how important infill is. Do you want to speak just for a moment about the value for our citizens in Kalispell to have an infill project? Just that, the savings for us.
Yeah. When you take a community and you've already got streets and sewer and water lines in place and they're vacant, your tax base is just minimal. It's actually costing us more to serve those lots than we ever get out of it. As development occurs, 2 things happen. The tax base of the city rises, which benefits everyone in the community by in terms of revenues to the city and how our taxes are assessed. It also brings in more activity, more opportunities for people to live and work in the downtown area. We are looking at neighborhoods here that we're going to be encouraging first floor retail, but maybe second and third floor residential. People will have the option and activities to actually live downtown, whether it's retired or young families or working. It's a lifestyle choice to be there. It's a trend that's happening across this country. So that's something we want to be part of and offer to our residents in Kalispell, where they can actually live and work, walk to your point of business, be able to shop, and have a greater vitality in your downtown area. So this is one, again, another one of the key benefits of what we see coming out of this. And we have enough vacant land, and we have enough amenities and opportunities in Kalispell that we think it's going to be a great marriage.
Thank you, Tom. I just didn't want us to sort of skip over that additional benefit. So here we are showing on this map, again, additional properties that are really primed, ready for redevelopment and reinvestment, whether those be from developers who are local or on a national scale. I mean, we are very happy that this project, also because of the national funding from Tiger, really puts Kalispell on the map for developers who are looking for opportunities. So there's quite a number of them. This is not an exhaustive list by any means, but it does point out some key or catalyst sites that we see as opportunities here in Kalispell. Yeah, please.
So this is probably an overview that you're all saying, I wish they would have started with this, because this really puts into perspective what the project is. But I'd like to take you through this project now, just from the very northeast corner all the way through Kalispell, so you can, in one breath, you can see what it is. And it's a project, it's evolved, and the pieces that keep falling into place. But as Katharine keeps saying, this is a win-win for everyone. So if you start at the very northeast corner of the project site where the rail park is, imagine abandoned gravel pit. We found a reuse for an abandoned gravel pit that was going nowhere, so that will become a rail industrial yard. When you build a rail industrial yard, you have to extend water and sewer. That site was annexed into the city. It's part of our tax base. We will be extending water and sewer lines down Whitefish Stage, down East Oregon, to serve that site. So that site will be fully served by streets, by sewer and water, and by storm sewer. So you'll have 4 or more building pad sites in the rail industrial park itself. That rail industrial park at 40 acres sits immediately south of about 50 acres owned by Burlington Northern. So while we're talking about a 40-acre rail park, really start thinking in terms of 90 to 100 acres of rail industrial use in that area. So now we start thinking in terms of, this is not just about relocating a Cenex, even though that is great. But we're talking now about multiple jobs, multiple activities, and potential for growth in our rail-served uses. That land is specifically set aside for rail users. It's not just industrial land, but it's specifically rail users. So we have municipal services extended down to that area, and we also have the water and sewer as they're extended down there. They're going through our existing neighborhoods. There's going to be a water line that's going to go along East Oregon going all the way west back to 4th, which will upgrade that neighborhood as well. So there's just continuing benefits. If you look at the map itself, you'll see that the rail park is going to be served by Highway 2. And you'll see a traffic light there at Flathead Drive. This project includes adding a traffic light or traffic signal. Now, if you've been, I just wanted to just think about being at the Conrad Complex across from Woodland Park, and you want to make a left-hand turn out to Highway 2 after you've finished going to the park or going to the Conrad Complex. Wait a minute, you can't. So we're going to have a traffic light that will benefit the public in that particular area. That will be a lighted intersection. That's also the main intersection for loaded trucks coming from the west to the east to turn onto Flathead Drive, which is a county road, and come into the rail park. Truck activity coming from the east will probably continue straight on through up by Office Max and go right through there because there's no crossing traffic. It's an easy turn in. But truck traffic leaving the park, we fully expect that they'll use the Flathead Drive access, hit the traffic light, and be able to get out in a coordinated fashion. So that's another add to this project. Right along Flathead Drive, that's where the rail runaround is going to be, where the trains will actually be turning around so they will never have to go through Kalispell again. The rail stops there, the turnaround will be right at that point. There'll be a parallel set of tracks constructed where there's one set of tracks now, there'll be 2 sets. So the trains will turn around there and come back. Then we hop on to the pedestrian bridge, and we have a trail system that goes all the way through Kalispell. As that trail system goes through Kalispell, we're going to have safe crossings at the various streets. We plan on having at least 4 more street crossings through this area so that the North Kalispell and South Kalispell can have access to each other. And just increase that ability to travel from neighborhood to neighborhood. As you get all the way through Kalispell, this trail system hooks up to our major trail system we have in the city, and by pulling the tracks out, opening up the street systems, we open up, 40 acres of land right now that is vacant, underutilized, or fully trapped. unable to develop. And you see the map there, the brown squares. Those are properties we've already talked to who are interested in doing something at some point who can't because of where they are right now. So fairly quickly, you start adding up what could happen out there. As Katharine said, the grant programs and the public dollars coming are $20 million, $21 million. Senex is bringing $12 million to the table, but it's very easy to be at $40 and $50 million worth of investment as private investment kicks in. And as we sit and talk about the future, you already see things happening. We see it in our office every day, but things move slowly when you're out in the streets. But stop and think, in the last 3 years, we have seen Depot Place, 40-unit senior housing complex constructed at Center and 4th. They went there specifically because they knew they were going to be on the trail system at some point in the future. And they said, this is where we want to be. We want our residents to have access to the trail. You see Brannigan's, the Irish Pub, a great location right next to the tracks. You see Starbucks. Starbucks, again, part of the Center Mall complex. And again, you have that owner who's seeing they want to invest in this area. They're willing to do it. They're willing to put money out because they see what the future can be. Down to A to Z, an engineering office along Center. The owner said that it was a great location. He knew this neighborhood was going to change for the better. He wanted to get in now because he felt that if he waited too many years, he would not have a chance to be able to build in this area because the values are going to be going up and things are going to be changing. So already we see small changes happening with the announcement of the Tiger Grant. If you saw the schedule, the next 3 years, tremendous activity is going to be happening. So things are going to be changing in a very rapid manner. And again, if you couple this with the bypass work that's going on the west side of Kalispell, this community is changing. It's changing, I will tell you, in a good way. But what we're seeing are projects that have been talked about for 20 and 30 years and no action. And today, right before your eyes, you're seeing them come to be. So this is an exciting time to be in Kalispell.
Well, I certainly think Tom has said it well. We are in the right place at the right time, and it's a great time to be in Kalispell. Really exciting things are right ahead of us. We're happy to take any other questions that you may have. So I'll pause for a moment. If I don't see any, I will also want to say that...
Why don't you ask me the most often asked question?
This is our favorite question. Favorite question of the project, and it's been coming up for years. And that is... Have we talked to the railroad about this project? Did anybody call the railroad folks? And let me tell you, quite certainly, yes, we talked to the railroad. Not only to BN, which owns the line that runs through Kalispell, but we also talk frequently with Watco, Mission Mountain Rail, which operates this short branch that's running through Kalispell. So we are very fortunate. We've had great relationships built with them. They sometimes have a reputation for being a little difficult to work with. That has not been our experience. We have really built strong communications with them. In fact, we're on weekly phone calls with them to talk about this project as we move it forward. And I will say, as sort of a go back, when we talk about the match that was provided by our community towards this Tiger Grant, so the grant itself, the award is $10 million, but this community put together, $11.175 million in match. Well, part of that match came from BN, and that is very unusual. And I think it speaks great volumes to their commitment to this community and to this project and their recognition of what good things it means for increasing rail business in our community in the future. So we're very pleased to have all of those partnerships. So again, we see wins in building partnerships between the city and FACETA, Flathead County Economic Development Authority, and with private businesses, specifically like BN, and Watco also has contributed funds. So we're very pleased for that.
Yeah, and I don't want to underestimate, the relationship with the railroad. I'm not sure if many of you have worked with the railroad in the past ever. I liken working with the railroad as somewhat like working with the federal government, except they don't have to return your phone calls. So we went, and that's been the Achilles heel of this project all along. How can you talk about redevelopment? How can you talk about pulling tracks out if you can't talk with the railroad? And it's been very difficult over the decades of doing that to the point we have captured their imagination and their desire to be involved in this to, as it was Katharine said, she has bi-weekly phone calls with them. We had a meeting about a month, about almost a year ago now, where we had, was it 8 railroad folks from Fort Worth, from Seattle, from Chicago, from Billings, and from Spokane in Kalispell. They wanted to see the project. They wanted to talk about the project. They're talking to us on an ongoing basis. So we have come a long ways in the 5 years since we started this project to where we are today. So these are exciting times. Any other questions? Thoughts? Yes, we have a question. The question is that the trail going east and west across the city of Kalispell, will it be a pedestrian or vehicle? It will be pedestrian, bicycles, walkers, that type of thing, but it's a non-vehicle trail. You know, we have the question is what happens now that the trail becomes popular and people come to situations like crossing Main Street? And that is a yet-to-be-designed feature, but I will tell you that in another life, we are working on what's the future of downtown. Is it a Main Street or is it a federal highway? And there is a lot of discussion with our downtown community to rethink what we do with our traffic on Main Street. We have the bypass coming online in less than a year. It's hard to imagine that. That's going to change the traffic flows in our community. We are talking about nominating another route on the east side of Kalispell. The council has already said that, you know, doing Willow Glen makes a lot of sense. Maybe that should be our next major priority for moving traffic around. Right now, we're taking so much traffic down Main Street that Main Street itself cannot function, so that as we get into the core area up here, we are severing our community. We're getting the tracks out, that's great, but Main Street is literally severing our community. So let's rethink about what Main Street looks like, and maybe the future of Main Street is a 3-lane road with a center turn lane. Maybe Main Street gets necked down. Maybe we have perpendicular or angle parking on one side of Main Street. Maybe we have narrower travel lanes and the traffic slows down a bit, and we need to have some type of a crossing feature that will be there. The intent here is to make it safe, not to be out there taking your chances. So yeah, the question is yes, these are coming attractions, and our trail system is intended to be under construction in 3 years, so we have 3 years to solve that issue. So that is something we're going to be looking at, taking it very seriously. Other questions, thoughts, comments, concerns? Another question was raised.
Talking about explanation. North or south?
So the question is what would narrowing Main Street do to discourage, encourage traffic, and what would that look like? And is it really a pipe dream? I think that's probably a good way of explaining it. If you start thinking about, we spend a lot of time thinking about what used to be and what is now. Let's talk about what things could be in the future. If we talk about opening up 3 or 4 more crossings across the railroad tracks, people now have options to drive around our community. Right now, everybody filters to Main Street and shoots across. But what if we had 3 or 4 more crossings where people could actually get across, where everything didn't have to function to Main Street? So that's the first thing. Our desire is to encourage traffic in and around the city. So what if we had a major route on the east side, a major route on the west side? We have the bypass, and how we start handling traffic in our community. I think the bypass is probably going to have more of a game change effect on this community than we really imagine right now. And as we look at that, what's that going to look like? I think we can actually encourage people to use the bypass. Now, people might say, well, you're discouraging traffic coming downtown. Isn't that going to hurt the downtown businesses? I will tell you that the downtown business community right now is pretty solidly behind the concept that Main Street is so busy right now. The traffic is moving so fast, and it is so big in terms of trucks that we don't have a chance to survive on Main Street. We've passed that window of having a Main Street be a Main Street. We've passed that. We've eclipsed that. That is not where our city council wants to be. That's not where the downtown merchants want to be. They want to have a traffic on Main Street that wants to be on Main Street, that wants to use Main Street, that came to be part of our community. And they're willing to take that gamble, I think, at this point, because right now it's a losing battle. And if you say this is the traffic level on Main Street, what's Main Street going to be like in 5 or 10 or 15 years? That traffic volume just keeps increasing. So how do we take measures to get Main Street back? And how do we rethink how traffic moves around our community? That's our job for the coming years. And again, that's why we've invested, that's why even today we're investing $34 million into completing the bypass along the north side. To make that a complete route going around. And there are going to be 5 interchanges on that bypass as it goes through. People will be able to hop on and hop off and use that. So that would be my answer at this point. Doug? Yes.
I guess I can speak to that a little. The project is budgeted such that Tiger funding will be spread throughout the project. So some Tiger funding will be spent at the rail park and some at the trail. And then city dollars will also go towards completing that trail. Still, even though we have a $10 million grant, there's still need for additional, there's places for additional grants to come in and help make that project easier, faster. So we will be pursuing other grant funds as well as we go along. We're not done with that. But yes, that Tiger funding will go throughout the entire project.
Yeah. So the trail is a funded program. It is a funded activity. Other questions? Well, gosh, thank you so much for coming today. And again, stay tuned. Things will be happening fast in terms of planning, which moves at glacial speeds. This is going to be a race. So hang on. It's going to be exciting. Thank you for coming. Thank you.